Can I? Let's stop with this line, religious motion. Not all religious people care only about religion and this is the only important thing for them in the world. Most of them like good education for the children. Most of them want cheap prices in order for them to have better quality of life. Most of them want good relationship with other people and not focusing only on that. I think yes, there are radicals that care only about religion and any change and anyone who threatens that makes them push away. But I think for most people it is as something that is important in their life, but it's not the only thing that is important, and we can actually change many of their behaviors if we're changing things for them. We're going to analyze two things in this debate. First, we're going to explain why just to get much more progressive religious people comparing to the ones who are conservative right now, and we're going to explain it by two mechanisms. And secondly, why just much better in the comparative than the ones who are a part of the religious, a part of the conservative religious, like in the status quo. Before I do that, one point of framing, 2 points of characterization. First, just when we're talking about progressive religions, we're talking about things that are coherent religious perceptions, not people that are saying we don't believe in God, it's not religion. We're telling people that are more liberal ideas, that think that men and women are equal, that thinks that you can be an LGBT person and still be religious. We think that they are more open-minded to liberal ideas. This is what we're talking about progressive. Now the mechanism, what we're going to do, we're going to give discount for taxes to any institutions that are a part of this progressive movement. We're going to build churches, synagogues, and mosques that are specifically related to this progressive movement. We're going to fund their education, their classes, and things that they are doing in order to promote their ideas. We're going to help them advertise and do campaigns in order to convince more people to be a part of these conservative ideas. Let's move to the first argument. Why we get yes?
Are you also promoting to the same extent the conservative movement?
No, we're not doing it to conservative, we're doing it only to them. And let's start by the first argument, why we get more progressive religion. The note characterization also answers what probably Schulman wants to say, because we think that for today the conservative ones has tons of resources and ability to compete in the market, and they're pretty much a monopoly in this market. They have many donors that traditionally are giving them a lot of money to be able to do whatever they want. They are already based in most of the countries because historically they had much more power, and therefore they are controlling the area and they're pretty much a monopoly. Therefore I think that they don't need the state's help, they're already existing. On the other hand, we think the progressive ones are now in a lack of resourcement. They are lack of base that they actually grew up and involved. We think that we change these things in two mechanisms. First, it's just organic growth of the progressive movement. Just more people are following this religious movement in the first place. How it is going to change for the ones who already exist. We think they are, first of all, just to think that people who want this option, but in the status quo, they just don't have it. We think there are many people who want it. For example, many people that are liberals, but they still care about religion as a part of their life. It's people that are not radicals, but they do care about it. But we think that in the status quo, they don't have this option. It is true because maybe there is no church in their neighborhood that is progressive. They need to drive 40 minutes or 1 hour to the church. Therefore, they are unlikely to do so every Sunday. They'll probably go to the Catholic church they have nearby. They don't have a school for the children that is progressive. Therefore, they're not going to send them 1 hour drive to the school. They're going to send them the one who are close, who are more conservative. We think that for these people, we now are building and doing these things. We just give them the option to do what they wanted in the first place. Therefore, it means that the children get this education of being more progressive, them getting these ideas of being more progressive. Here, the rabbis or priests that talk about these ideas. Also, second, I just think it will be much cheaper for them because even if in the same neighborhood there is now a Catholic school and a progressive school, we think that once now the Catholic school is so much cheaper because of all the donation, because they have all this power, that it is a lunatic decision for a parent to send their children or to go to a church that is much more expensive. I think now when we are funding that, when we are helping them with government assistance, this is where we flip that and it makes it much more cheaper for them to do so. And we think that when it will be pretty much equal prices, these people will benefit to go to the progressive thing. The second mechanism of why we get more is just the change within people. I think that conservative people are just going to start to change their mind. And note who are we talking about. There is a scale. They are the very radical ones, we are not going to change them. The other ones who are secular, we are not going to change them. But I think there are a lot of gray area in the middle of people that are religious and can't flip their mind and go decide whether to go. They don't think that every progressive idea is a sin and everything is horrible. They can't change their mind, they are in the middle. I think that it's a large group that exists. why we think that, first of all, we can't change their perception of religion and believe that religion can change. We think that most people just, in religion, are following hierarchical structure. Therefore, they believe that the interpretation they get from their leader, from their rabbi, we think that this is what they are following and believe that it is religion. Therefore, the question here is whether the leaders are able to change their mind, and if they are doing so, the communities follow. We think that they are able to do so in two ways. First, we just think that many of them have follow national incentive already in the status quo. We see that today there are a lot of religious practices that are illegal, and most religious people just don't follow it. We think that, for example, there are religious people that sells buildings and lands to not Jewish ones, even though it is a sin according to the halakha. We think that these things are. This shows that they have different incentives. Also, secondly, we think that they care about many things. If they are leader of communities, they feel responsible for the people. Therefore, they want better economical situation for them. They want good education for them. They want to send most of them to trip to Mecca to see the things that are really important for leaders. They want to buy a new Bible book to their synagogue. We think that these things are just now are the tipping point they can do so and cannot do it in a comparative. Before I continue, bottom up.
If those people are so responsive to progressive values, you can promote progressive values in the context of religion.
Yeah, but we think that these people still are a part of the religious. They still want the children to go to religious education because it is still important part of their life, even if it's not the only one. We think that therefore the secular ones who can promote progressive ideas as much as they want, it affects the secular one, but the one who have no synagogue in the neighborhood, no progressive religious school in the neighborhood, they're not going to send the children to a secular place. But once it's a place that is that also religious, we think it's much more likely to happen in the first place. We think it is a tipping point because we think that they just have the ability to do it because they get all this funding, and now they can actually fulfill it and fulfill their other incentives according to that. And secondly, we just think that there will be a lot of demand for leaders to go to these new churches, to teach in these new schools. We just think it creates a lot of demand for rabbis and priests, and we think that the younger one will see an opportunity to promotion and are most likely going to do so, and the younger one are also the more liberal ones. Why all these things are extremely important? I think just relation to minorities. I think that the conservative religion just treat them horrible minorities. It's women that have no involvement in the religion itself, and many times, for example, in Judaism, they can't study the Bibles as everyone else. They can't join the prayers like everyone else. We just think in the progressives that give them more opportunity to be part of religion. But also, secondly, it gives them more opportunity to be equal, to get equal rights, to get equal treatment from their husbands, etc. Well, it's talking about LGBT people that are now much more congregated and get this right that they want. It's much better in our world. Please propose.
I thank the Foreign Minister. We'd like to continue the leader of the opposition here.
So we're good to go? Okay, so 3, 2, 1. No. 2 points in my speech. One, why under the status quo where we don't do this, progressivism is likely to win anyway, since it seems that government agrees that progressivism is generally good and they just see this as like a better way to do it. So we went on their metric and also our metric. 2, I'm going to explain the issue with religion and why we think that a world with just more progressive people is better than a world with like progressive religious people, right? Okay, so in general, my rebuttals will primarily be like my primary competing analysis. I think that OG basically give us like a huge case on why this is likely to work on converting religious people. I will explain why this is unlikely to work and why our method is more likely to work. Okay, so why progressivism will win anyway? I want to talk about how people generally change their mind. People are not like logic robots that have like fundamental starting axioms and then like consistently build up their entire worldview from that every day when they wake up, right? People generally have like sort of like clusters of values that they value, and generally, whenever those values corrode against each other and contradict each other, then eventually one value will tend to win out over the other one, and one of them gets stronger and the other one gets weaker. This is fundamentally what we've seen in the past several years, in the past like several decades, with the general secularization of Western society. Right? We see that generally, as society becomes more progressive, it also becomes less religious. Why? Because no matter like what government says, which is not much, but how progressive religion is supposed to work, religion is fundamentally based in conservative politics, right? Like, I'm sorry, no amount of hand-waving is going to get rid of the fact that the Bible said that a dude sleeping with another dude is a grave sin and an abomination, right? Like, there's a limit. There's a limit to how much we can do this before we start just straight up ignoring the Bible. And because of this, we think that progressive religion essentially involves a certain level of just ignoring the Bible anyway. So for this to work, we need to appeal to people's impulse to disregard their religious values in a sense. Anyway, right? So we think that it is far more, that when people are in modern society, where they understand generally that women deserve equal rights to men, where they understand that it is not just a woman's job to stay at home and take care of children, where they understand that gay people can be in loving relationships just like straight people, and the trans people probably deserve medical rights and stuff like that, we think that when they, as we see in modern society, by exposure to people that they know, values that they hold, media, whatever, they get exposed to the intuitive notion that these things are good ideas, this corrodes against their understanding of religion, which prescribes them the opposite. And the likely thing that happens, as we've seen empirically, is that people that are like generally on the fence, which are the people that government here are targeting anyway, generally just become less religious. Okay? So we think that we do not understand at all why it works better for us to just try to push progressive religion, where these people that are susceptible to progressive religion are pretty likely to just stop being religious anyway, which is what we see. Now, we also, yeah.
Listen, religion doesn't have to fundamentally be conservative. That's why we can reinterpret and change the way we see things so that now gay people is fine and women are equal, etc., etc. You're just wrong about the fact that religion is inherently bad.
Okay. I don't know, Christianity already does this to an extent where they just reject a bunch of parts in the Bible where they don't count, but then people that are Christians forget this fact and then say that those parts count anyway. We do not think that you can fundamentally assume that the Bible is the Word of God, but also like reinterpret the things. Like people like to talk about reinterpretation, but it requires huge stretches to reinterpret these things as like progressive ideals, where the Bible has so many ways where it explicitly condemns this sort of thing. And since we're talking about mainstream religion, we still have to rely on the Bible somewhat. It's not like the New Testament was like, wait, no, shit, gays are cool now, like we were wrong, sorry dudes, right? Okay, so I want to talk about why religion is like fundamentally bad and problematic, okay? We think that religion generally hurts society in a few ways. One, we think that it generally hurts people's autonomy by restricting them to do things that they would otherwise want to do for entirely like metaphysical reasons that are like unrelated to people's happiness or people's own understanding, just because it was like written in a book somewhere and maybe was interpreted to be in a way that sucks slightly less, but we do not think generally that this is like a good thing that can be like measured on any moral metric that is not just based on what the Bible says, right? We also think that fundamentally, if you're religious, if you're really religious, and you, especially for Christian, you believe in the concept of hell, you basically have two options. One, live in undying mortal fear of infinite torture forever. Two, live in cognitive dissonance of denying this fact, right? We think that one is obviously terrible, but two is also bad, because we think that living in cognitive dissonance forever is probably not a good thing, and probably hurts you, and probably generally has a corrosive function. A corrosive function on your general ability to like think logically and like and handle like contradicting ideas. Yes, POI.
Yeah. Until 100 years ago, women were not legal witnesses in Judaism. Are all the rabbis nowadays sinners?
Okay. Again, religion in every step of society has been, in all of time in history, has stood against like progressive ideas. We think that in the comparative, trying to incorporate progressive ideas into religion, where religion basically gets dragged kicking and screaming towards holding these values while trying to somehow make up interpretations on how they work out anyway, we think that it is much more likely to just like, instead of spending money on propping up religious progressivism, we just promote progressivism irrespective of religion and let people reach their own conclusions. I think this is like a way more effective way to do this. I also want to talk about empiricism and why it's so important. We think that religion, because it asserts facts about the universe, it cannot be empirically measured in any way, generally promote a lack of belief and understanding and empiricism in society. We can see this in the way that like religion is the only reason why people deny evolution, even though every single piece of evidence states otherwise. We can see these sorts of things justification for climate change, for not believing in vaccines. Because if you manage to believe one thing without proof in the world, it is way easier to believe other things. So many of our modern issues in society stem fundamentally from people denying things that are real, from denying the evidence in front of them. And if you are religious, this is much easier to do because you have already done this once. And after you do this once, it is easier to do it a second time. Because of this, and because of the fact that a lot of our issues in our current society stem from people fundamentally rejecting on a certain level empiricism, we think that a world without religion will generally have less of this problem. And because of my previous point, that we are very likely to just reduce the amount of religious people anyway, we think the people will generally be less prone, will be more prone to believing in empiricism and generally agree on scientific measurements and facts more, which will lead to a better ability overall to handle societal problems such as climate change, vaccines, etc., etc. So, in summary, we do not understand the need for progressive religion. We think that progressivism is basically antithetical to religion that has to be dragged kicking and screaming to modern times. We do not think this will help us in any way, and people are much more likely to abandon their religion than to abandon their progressive values. Thank you.
I thank the speakers very much, and that call for the Deputy Foreign Minister, Dovzhenko.
I just want to start and say that I am quite confused, but very happy on the opening opposition's case. Because listen to the last argument by opening opposition. They claim that religion is a bad thing. They claim they would have preferred if people would have been less religion than to be religious progressives. I think that this stance is binding for all of the opposition side because they can't rebut both religion being bad and religion being something that we need to protect. So every argument that we follow now on and say that we should care about the feelings of those religious orthodox or stuff like that will be in somewhat contention to OO, so I believe that CO should regard us. I'm going to talk about three things in my speech. First of all, where does the obligations of the state lie? Secondly, where do people have more choice? And thirdly, will the religion actually change? Although I think Lior has actually proved all of those things very good, I'm going to prove them even more. Before that, a few points of external rebuttal. First of all, about all of the idea of promoting progressivism over progressive values. I'm not really sure how those things looks like in practice. This is not what I support specifically, but let's explain why do I still think that promoting progressive religions is better. First of all, because it gives more choice to people. We think that there are people who would have preferred to be progressive religions to being progressive. If those people now have the choice because of this motion, I think this is generally a good thing that we support as the state. Obviously, we will promote also progressive values as well as most general states do today. Secondly, we think that it's very hard to promote progressive values within religious communities where they are already taught in schools, in their communities, about the orthodox values and the conservative values. So we think it won't be effective if we want to do it through their institutions. And actually, promoting those values through the institutions is the motion that we are discussing. Because when we are talking about really a progressive religious movement, as Lior has analyzed, we are talking specifically about the movements that do accept the LGBT, do have more human rights, do accept more of other religions, and we think that those are the things that we support just from within the religion. But thirdly, we think that there is a value for religion for itself. We think that religion gives a lot of people the sense of community, the sense of belonging to a specific place, the sense of meaning within your life. And we think that if people will have those senses that are really beneficial to them, but also won't be harmful towards other people within their community, this is a better state of mind than if they were only progressive. We think this is a great thing if there are people who are believing that, even if I don't do it personally. Secondly, when they're talking about the progressive values winning overall, and therefore those is the comparative that we need to talk about, just first of all, we don't think that because something has happened is analysis that this something will happen in the future as well. It might be true there was some atheism movement within the West in the last 300 years. It doesn't mean that it will move on. It might be that the communities that stabilize today will stay in the same manner. But secondly, we think that actually we see those things happening today. We see in many countries communities that do stay within their religion. We see the rise of Catholicism within Europe. We see the rise of Orthodoxy within Israel. We think that they're probably having more children, which also adds to this fact. So we think that it's not going to fade away completely, and we would have preferred if those people would act more progressively as Lior has analyzed. But okay, thirdly, they are telling that, okay, but religious people are bad because they are not looking at evidence and stuff like that. So first of all, we just want to say that this is not comparative. Obviously, atheists too sometimes overlook evidence. Obviously, everyone has their own blind spot regarding politics, regarding history, regarding nationalism. Don't think it overruling over their own identity. Secondly, we think that people generally tend to make the difference between like the metaphysical things about believing in God to specifically believing in the scientific method, and specifically within progressive movements, most of the people believe in both. But even if it is true, to some extent, it's still not comparative to the benefits that I've discussed that happens only within religions, so we think that this is good enough to overtake the opening opposition's case. Before I move on, I will take closing.
Could you please justify the state taking the money of all people and then deciding to give it to a specific...
Yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do right now. So about the obligations of the state. We think that first of all, the comparative within this debate that happens within most of the societies already is the state giving tax cuts and giving some money to all of the religious institutes. The things that we are changing is giving more money to those progressive and giving less money to the conservative places. Why is that justified generally and specifically the change that we are doing? Because first of all, we think that religion, that the state has an obligation to the well-being of the people that live within the state. It has an obligation to give them more choice. It has an obligation to give them the possibility to acquire a sense of meaning. And we think that for many people, religion is a great way of doing so. We think that people without religion won't have access to many of those ideas, and the money that we give them directly gives them access. As the state is justified to give people money for food, for welfare, for stuff like that, we think that for many people, religion is more important than food, and the sense of meaning they get there is more important, so obviously the state is also justified to give the money to this place. But why is it more justified to give the money to the progressive place than the orthodox place? Because we think that the orthodox places also have harms. They might have some benefits, but they also have other harms that don't occur within the progressive places. The harms that Lior has discussed, the harming of people, the things that I will discuss in my next point. So if we have two things that are beneficial, one of them is more beneficial, then we are allowed to give less to X and more to Y, and we think that this is what we are doing within this motion. So secondly, about where do people have more choice as the thing that the state is obligated to maximize. So we say that first of all, as Lior has analyzed, today there is a lack of access for many people to those progressive ideas, even if they support them as religious people. Just giving those places money maximizes the choice of those people that don't have access. Secondly, the people who go to those progressive places have more choices over their life, and therefore we think this is a good thing within itself, and specifically if there are minority groups as the one Lior has discussed, which are today in other places, are taken off of many of their choices. So we think that generally, we think that people have more choice under our side of the house than the other side of the house, and therefore the state is allowed to do these things and should do these things. So will the religion change? We think that first of all, we didn't get any direct rebuttal from OO, and they actually think that our cases work because of the comparison they take, because they say like the comparative is progressive religions versus progressive, so they assume that it is going to be progressive religions on our side of the house. But just like say, why do we think that's happened? Because all of their arguments on that sounds like, but it can't be that people will believe in religion progressive things. I think first of all, this is quite an equity thing against all of the billions of people who do believe in progressive things, telling them that they are not, that it's not possible for billions of people to think what they think is just not true. But we think that religion can change, as Lior have told you, with the witnesses, with the Pope liking gay people instantly, with like Lior giving all of its arguments to those things. We think that those things weren't rebutted and actually accepted. So please, for all of these reasons, support the motion. Thank you.
Oh, the camera's here, so I can't switch on the podium.
I have
Worst thing.
Mr. Blatt for the deputy leader of the opposition guy, Lior.
Okay, I stand again. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Look, when prep started, I told Itai, we're probably not going to break, this is the top room, we can have fun. But after seeing OG's pathetic attempt to excuse progressive religion, I believe that we can actually win on proving to you that religion is bad. 2 points in my speech. First of all, why do we get more secularism in our world? And furthermore, why we don't think that a progressive religion is a metric by itself. We don't care that people will become more progressively religious. And secondly, why religion is inherently bad? We think that OG did a pathetic attempt as well as actually defending this. No. Why do we think one excellent point of rebuttal outside of this? OG tell you they have more choice and the type of impact the fact that they have a choice by itself? No. By that logic, we can build churches of literally any type of religious movement that we can possibly think of, and we technically give them more choice. We say that they already have the choice by believing in progressive religion. Internally, we don't think that that government subsidizing churches is that inherently much of a choice as an impact. Now, on secularism, and why do we think that we win on that note? What it tries to tell us? It tries to tell us that they might stabilize and that religious movements rise today. On the point that religious movements rise today, this is a lie. It's true for Israel because the government subsidizes Haredis, but we don't think that it's general true. We think that secularism is up on most of the world constantly. Why is that true? I will actually give you an analysis which Itai started, and I will finish. Here's what we think. We think that progressivism today is generally a pretty pushed forward narrative. We think that most of the elites of society, such as elites in general media, such as elites in academia, such as most top politicians, etc., are either secular and progressive, or live in a more secular and progressive environment than, say, absolutely religious people, and therefore push progressivism as the media as it continues. Right? I think that it is objectively true that most people in general media and all of that are religious, and that is true. Furthermore, we tell you that we absolutely agree with CO that we can also use all of the money that OG wants to push for progressive religion to just push for normal progressivism. We can absolutely use all of the fiat that they just need to push progressive religion to just push normal progressivism as the continual of the narrative in the world. What does this mean? This means that we get more secularism. Why is that? Itai already started to explain that, right? Because at that point, we'll probably convince some amount of people that progressivism is true. They see it a lot in the narrative around them. They see it a lot in even secular society, because society in general is becoming more and more secular. In most democracies, there is a separation of church and state to the extent that the state doesn't dictate religious laws. Again, Israel is an outlier in most of them. This is real, and therefore they also, most religious people, go into secular society and live most of their life within a more secular progressive society, and therefore they also get progressive values. What does this mean? This means that they now have these two clusters that Itai talked about about progressivism and religion, which will at some point clash. We think that first of all, even by default, some more will become secular, which is good by itself. But second of all, we think that progressivism actually has a higher chance of winning because most of society around them is progressive. Most of everything, because of the entire progressive narrative, which is stronger. I will take CG later. It already took 2 PR. Now, why do we think additionally that this is important? There might be there might be a contingency of people who are extremely religious, not going to secular society at all, for example, or they might prove that they get more progressively religious people. Okay, that's fine. We don't think that progressive religious people is the metric by itself. Why is that? Because we think that their entire explanation of this, which is that some people are oppressed by religion, we think that these people can leave religion. Why is that so? We think that, as we already said, secularism is on the rise. The separation between church and state is on the rise. We think that human rights which allow you to live your life as you want are on the rise, like the international sanctions against countries which do not respect human rights. Like most functioning democracies have human rights which allow you to live as you want. And we think that because of secular society exists outside, progressive society exists outside, and you know that it exists outside because nobody is removing it for you. You can actually choose to leave. What this means is that if you're, say, a gay religious person who's oppressed by religion, or a woman which is oppressed by religion, you can just leave religion. You cannot. You don't have to suffer through the forceful mechanisms of religion. We think that it is absolutely possible that if you are gay and suffer through religion, by the same way that you have, say, your gay values as a cluster because that's your identity, you will probably choose to leave religion because you suffer through tremendously. And there's the alternative secular society which does not make you suffer. And therefore, we do not think that progressivism is actually having more progressive religious people is actually important in this debate, because people will leave religion. Also, that's another impact because women leave religion and gay people leave religion. That's because more secularism because of the fact. I want to take stage.
Yeah. What if you don't want to leave religion because you believe in a higher being, want the community and something to cling to? Okay, so you can just join your local progressive religious church. We think that there's a small amount of people who do that. You can still, there's the internet, you can create a small church in your town because some cities are a lot. I will not take OG, please stop trying. You already had your chance in responding. Now, on why religion is bad. You see, we think that the only thing that OG gives us is that religion creates you community and meaning. We think that you can also find community and meaning within secular society. You can find community and meaning, for example, by
advocating progressive values and strengthening it. I already want to take it, please do not annoy me. We think that you can find meaning in all of that community within secular society. We think that you can absolutely, let's say, join progressive movements, join movements to your cause. You can find meaning in what you do in your life, etc. And you find like a community within secular society. This is not an impact. What are the actual impacts on why religion is inherently bad that Itai gives to you? Itai gives to you, first of all, and this was absolutely not analyzed, not attacked at all, the impact of autonomy. I will now use Ido's analogy, I will now use Ido's analogy from the Open Championship 2 years ago. We think that religion inherently makes you like a pig in a barn. Because God inherently is like always watches you. God has all of these decrees, which even a progressive religion, it has decrees. You always must follow the laws of God. You inherently lose your autonomy as a person. You inherently lose the most basic thing about you, which is basic autonomy and to decide. Second of all, the existence of hell, right? Because you either honestly believe that some people suffer forever, which is a horrible thing. You honestly believe that some people like absolutely are doomed to suffer forever, or you live in a constant denial of yourself where you do not think that hell exists. And thirdly, about the rejection of empiricism. You don't try to tell you, oh, but they do not always reject empiricism. They do a separation. I mean, some people might do, but not that, like I know that some atheists reject. But not the unique thing here, which is that that religion inherently requires you to do at least some amount of rejection of empiricism. You inherently begin with the rejection of empiricism compared to an atheist who absolutely does not need to reject empiricism at any point. At the point where you begin rejecting empiricism, at the point where you even begin to think, thank you, Tomer, for this support, at the point where you even begin to reject empiricism, we think that it is much easier for you to reject other forms of empiricism because you inherently like get this viewpoint that sometimes rejection of empiricism is good, which allows you to reject other forms. Because religion inherently hurts your autonomy as a human person, because religion inherently makes you believe in horrible concepts, and because religion inherently makes you reject empiricism, we call you to oppose. We think that religion is horrible. Thank you.
I thank the speaker for his speech and that was for the government. So this would appear on camera, I would ask everyone not to call other people pathetic. Thank you.
Once actually, I'll come back quick.
Here's some euphemism.
Okay. Okay. 3, 2, 1, go. We agree with the opening government that we think that the things that has changed very little in this debate is what happens to people who are very, very religious, right? They probably are still going to continue listening to whatever there is and whatever, and sure, they'll get progressive things from Western society. We think that the important delta in this debate is something that opening government started to touch upon, but didn't actually do an actual analysis of why we get this, which is what we're going to fill in here, which is how you're going to help actually like people who don't have religion today, who are progressive in their thoughts and therefore think they have no place in religion, to be able to find something that will be able to help them in the same ways that OG said. We're going to explain this in just a much deeper way. I have no time like this is bad. Okay. Also, so let's go a bit of rebuttal to opening. Let's do a bit of rebuttal to opening opposition first. So the fact that like. So they talk about the fact that you don't need to push progressiveness. So like we just agree in general that you don't, but like we just don't think that's the focus of this debate. You talk about how people can find community and meaning in other places. Like we just, okay, sure, like, you know, we're all weirdos who love debate, so somehow we found some sort of community and like we're friends and like we're now in a college and we think that most people, you need to be able to find a specific hobby that happens to have a group that's very well organized, where people are willing to invest tons of their time, and this is something that is very, very hard to do. We think that most of modern society just isn't built around building communities. It isn't built in a way that allows you to easily find a community and find a society. People have like their 9-to-5 jobs where they maybe have a few friends and then they go home and like don't have their neighbors and don't have anyone to talk to and don't have anyone around them. And we think that it's just really, really hard to actually find community in modern society today. And just something about like hell and about the bad things, we want to like point out that when you're talking about progressive religion, we think that in many cases these religions are, you know, progressive. As in, they don't say you're going to go to hell. They say, you know, okay, maybe sure hell exists, but we think that most people don't get there. If you're going to be a good human being, you're probably not going to go there. And you don't focus on hell in the same way that extreme religions do. So we just think that a lot of these benefits and a lot of stuff, a lot of the bad things just don't exist automatically because of religion. They exist because of all these things. Other things we're going to talk about about specifically in rebuttal. Cool. Like in our case. Let's talk about it. So, let's talk about why we think the active government duty to actually do this. Opening government talked about how you know, you need to give people a sense of meaning and options. We want to add a few more things to this, right? We want to say that just like, you know, in the same way that government promotes art and culture and stuff like that, this is something that the government finds important to, in general, enrich people's lives and make people happy. Like, the whole point of why we have, like, the government's purpose is to make sure that people have some sort of best lives. This is what we believe in democracy, of people deciding that they want something better. We think that also just, you know, happy people cause less problems for the country, right? If I'm going to be happier, I'm going to have a community, I have less mental health issues, and I'm not going to end up in, in government institutes that are going to have to deal with me. I'm probably going to be, like, you know, more productive for the GDP. Secondly, we think that, and this is more important, we think that the government comes in to fix market failures in many cases, right? We think that most people want to be part of non-progressive religions, but with non-progressive religions, people aren't as willing to, like, pick up the mantle in order to actually build these religions up in the same way that extreme religions are. We think that, you know, it's something that is good for me, but, like, it's something that I believe that everybody should have this, and therefore I'm not going to start, like, you know, trying to bring other people in and, like, strengthening the movement that way. And with the more extreme religions, religion takes up the entire part of your life, which means that this is something that you're willing to donate a lot more to, if it's time, if it's the thing, and it's also just, like, you know, listening to religious leaders that are telling you to invest in stuff, and, like, because so basically, because, like, no individual person is willing in the progressive side to step this up, because the religion is only a small part, I think that this is something that the government has a duty to come in and fix the failure of the commons in the same way that it does, like, with the open market, when there are people who want something that's helpful and it doesn't fit. Okay, cool. Let's talk about why this is something very, very beneficial. So again, opening government spoke a bit about why this is something that is helpful and something that, you know, is good for people and good for community. We just want to focus a minute about all these things. We already gave the rebuttal of why our community is something that is just so critical and is very hard to come by in society. We just think that having a place to come meet and meet up and something that brings people together is something that you get uniquely from religious places in a way that you don't need to find, like, a specific time that connects. You have, like, something a bit more general that you can find exactly where you want to fit in, and this is something that's helpful. We think that also, like, a lot of people just sometimes often need something to believe in. I said this is critical because, like, opening up position says to be religious, you need to throw away all empirical, all connections to, like, empirical evidence. We think that religion in many cases comes and fills in the holes that empirical evidence just doesn't know what to do with, right? Empirical evidence doesn't know to tell me what our purpose is. They know how we got here, but they don't know to tell me what I should be doing with my life, what's going to make me a happier person, what's going to make me a better person. This is why people have so many, like, attempts at self-help. We think that this is exactly the place where religion comes in and fills in this hole that people are needing, right? We also think that it's something that religion gives me something to lean on, right? It tells me that when my loved one dies, this is something that they, then, you know, they're in a better place and someone is taking care of them. It tells me that it gives me a community to support me when I'm going through this process of grief. In general, when I'm having a hard time, so this is like both the belief itself and the community gives me something to lean on. Okay? Let's talk about who this helps. Before we continue, I'd like to take a closing, please.
No one is going to change the religion or become religious because of tax cuts or the fact that there's a new school in town.
Okay, let's explain exactly, led me to my next point, who we think is going to be joining these things. One, exactly the people that opening opposition talked about, who, you know, want to leave the religion because they're basically a lot of people who do want to feel something part of better, do connect to a lot of the ideas of religion, but today feel pushed out by the very negative things of religion, right? They are not homophobic, so I don't want to be connected to a religion that is. The religion demands a lot of me, and I just don't have time for that in my life, so it doesn't tell me that there is a place for me to be connected to something better, and those places just don't exist. We think that this is exactly the kind of people that helps. So A, like people, you know, who don't want to be completely religious anymore but still want to have some connection. B, people who, like, you know, want to have the belief but don't want to have the practice and want to have something that's more general. Which again, notice that these things just don't exist without a thing. We think also just people who feel super lonely and want to have this community, and people who want to, and people who, like, who won't be religious and will be pushed away by other things. We just think that, like, basically, we think that like this comes and fills in a need that is very hard for people to fill in by themselves, of being able to have a place where you can get some like support, get even like someone to talk to without having to pay them like tons of money, and get a place where like you can have support, have community, have the connection to something bigger in a much stronger way, that without having to be connected to the more extreme parts of religion, which today push people away, make it really hard for people who want to join. We think that the moment you have stuff like advertising, the moment you have stuff like actual, synagogues or temples that exist in my community because the government is funding them more, then you get this. For all these reasons, please propose.
I thank the speaker. I'd like to call for the member of the opposition.
What is closing opposition going to do instead? First, we're not going to say that my religious girlfriend who is sitting right there is a mindless automaton or a pig in a bar. Secondly, we are going to say that there is a huge confusion in government side between freedom of religion and supplying religion. Specifically, we are saying that freedom of religion is a negative right. It is something that the state should not intervene in, but that also means that positively it should not intervene in and it should not fund it. And when they suggest to fund religion, and especially when they suggest to fund a specific religion over all other religions, they are doing something that is illegitimate, and therefore this should just be, this should never pass. Secondly, we'll talk about the conservative backlash, which is a very obvious point, but for some reason, opening opposition decided to spend their time elsewhere. Okay, what did we get from closing government before? So first of all, closing government and open government said people want to have a community. They want to find meaning. We don't understand why the state needs to fund a religion for it. Please notice, if their mosque wouldn't have tax cuts, it would still exist. All of them would just pay a little more. There was never the poor person who could not join a religion because it was too expensive for it. So we have no idea in which sense they need the state, and we have never heard any explanation of it. But then they seconded, oh, there is a market failure. Perhaps I cannot find the specific religion that suits my needs. Who cares? This is not a market. This is a way of life. And the fact that you can't find a specific way of life that is the best for you does not mean that the state ought to supply that for you. Okay, you know what? I am attracted to snakes. Should the state provide me with a snake for me to do my bidding? No, this is a ridiculous idea. If you can't find a proper religion, make one yourself. For all we care, the state does not need to supply that for you, and especially it does not need when opening government themselves tell us that those communities exist. So go there. Are people just not aware that those people that share the same values as them exist? This is ridiculous. How does the state know about the existence of those communities to fund it? But for some reason, all the people that would want to join this community does not know about it. No, they can just go there if this is important to them. My God. Let's talk about legitimacy. Look, the state is a powerful, violent entity. It controls everyone under the rule of violence. They threaten us with the police. We must obey by laws that none of us have directly agreed to. They take away our money, stealing it in order to give it to some other causes. This is something that requires justification. Specifically, the mechanism, as we've heard from OG, of actually funding those people, of taking specific public spaces and then denoting them as belonging to a specific sect and religion, is something that needs to be defended. Now, why is this something that is not defensible on their side? Look, we usually justify the state actions in one of two ways. One, we say that this is something that the people have agreed to if they have expressed their democratic concerns. This is clearly not the case in this situation. Why? Because obviously most of the religious people, per the analysis that we've heard from OG, are opposed to this policy. This is not a policy they are okay with, and if you don't believe me now, you would definitely believe it once I analyze the conservative backlash. And please notice, they admit that the vast majority of religious people do not belong to this specific progressive sects, and therefore probably most people do not want this policy, and this goes against the will. But it goes further than that, because we're saying that the state doesn't just give you anything. The state gives you the thing that you cannot, the state gives you the things that they know you need. There are two reasons why this does not apply to religion. One, because the religious institution does not require a state. In fact, religions have existed in the natural order before states even existed, because all you need for a religion is a belief, and a belief is not something that you need from the state. It's something that you can have for yourself, it's something that you can have with your loved ones, but there is just no need for the state to do that. But secondly, the reason you cannot do this is simply because you can never decide which religion is best. Please notice, unlike, for example, medicine, where you can say, you know what, this medicine is better than this medicine using some evidence, there is never an evidence suggesting that one religion is better than another religion. So when they want to say that they want to give money to a specific religion over another, in that sense, we're saying you're making a decision that the state cannot make. You're making a metaphysical decision, essentially saying that God wants this and doesn't want that. And this is something that we think is reprehensible and is never defensible, that the state would do exactly that. Now, we know that they're saying, oh, but we find all sorts of culture. But first of all, we are saying absolutely the state should not just fund culture. We're absolutely opposed to that as well. But secondly, at least when it comes to culture, we're saying that this is something that most people can agree to, that people actually need the state to fund and would not exist otherwise, and so on. Yes?
For many people, religion is more important than food. This is the definition of basic need. But even if you don't believe it, because of the conservative monopoly, people don't have access to many choices that we help them supply.
But there is no need to supply choices. People don't have the right to any religion that they have, and specifically to a school that is under this specific religion, or a public space that is under this religion. If they want this specific choice of religion, let them do it at home. They do not need us. Again, unlike, and by the way, they say this is like food. Most states do not fund food. Why do they not fund food? Because most people have food, and they only fund food for those who can get it. This is just does not apply to religious people. They can all get religion. They might not get the specific religion that they want, but all the religious people that want religion get religion. I will just say something very quickly about the backlash, just to explain why this is so annoying to conservative people. Because to conservative people, this is essentially the state saying, this religion is right and this religion is wrong. They look at those progressives and they say, when you take a woman and you give them a Torah book, you are defiling the Torah book. Those are people who are not only sinners, they also try to convince everyone that sinning is actually a religion. This is the worst defilement of religion one can have. This is why they hate it. This is why the state should never support such a thing. We beg you to oppose.
I thank Khoury for his speech. I'd like to call for the Yishai, Lior.
I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. I'm not sure if I'm worried or flattered that Schulman didn't even try to engage like the 3 mechanisms we gave for when the state needs to intervene in order to provide people with what we would consider basic services, thus meeting the criteria for when we would intervene.
I mean, Schulman gets up and tells us, the state is a violent body that takes away people's stuff and should minimize as much intervention as possible. That's clearly not how the vast majority of us actually see state actions. That's why we do fund things like art. That's why most people are happy that the state funds public schools, even though technically we could all band together and make a private school if we wanted to, right? Or, we could all just build a road if we wanted to. The state exists for 3 reasons that we already talked about. 1, coordination problems. It comes to solve those. There are times when it's hard for any individual person to organize and manage a large project that needs to be undertaken in order to provide a public good. Secondly, providing public goods in general. There are things that, if they existed, many people would enjoy and be happy that they existed. And if we do, but there are freeloaders who disincentivize us from providing it because they are not willing to pay for the public good. They take advantage of this public good, and so if we do not intervene from the outside in order to either prevent the freeloaders or provide some kind of general incentive so that this will exist, anyway, it will not exist because people don't want to feel like Freiheit. Thirdly, we tell you that these options just don't arise otherwise, and thus people are going to miss out. We tell you this for 4 reasons. 1, because people won't give as much natural funding because these religions are not as crucial a part of their daily life. Secondly, because they're more fragmented because these people are likely to disagree on things because they're fucking liberals. Thirdly, because they have less set hierarchical structures and less intense and organized lobbies. And finally, because just like religious leaders likely within these communities aren't the kind of people who are going to say, you must do what I say or you're going to hell, but rather are kind of like, listen, we know you enjoy this community and you see a lot of value from it. Can you please give us some money so we can carry on functioning? And most people, when it's put to them in that term, don't give money even when they would be happier when these things existed, because people are selfish bastards who like freeloading, and that's exactly when the government should intervene. Great. I think this takes most of what Schulman was trying to say out of the debate, which is why I wanted to re-clarify. Because I think that this is exactly the place where we have a positive action that the government should be taking to provide a general service that everybody else wants and everybody, or not everybody I guess, but the vast majority of people would enjoy that they cannot otherwise get. This is also why it should be specifically for progressive religions rather than conservative religions, because conservative religions, yes, manage to organize, exist historically, have very good donors, which means that they are likely to continue existing even if we don't fund them, while progressive religions don't have this kind of background, and so we should not fund them because they just don't need it. We would be perfectly fine with not funding the art. In fact, we don't fund extremely successful artists who have tons of money, who don't need this funding in order to exist. We fund the indie artists who, without our funding, won't be able to provide their critique of society, won't be able to give the public good that they normally give. I think that, sadly, I think CO out of this debate. What else is that I want to say for them? Even if you don't accept anything I say until now, I just think on the utilitarian metric, we win because we've shown you until now that more people are going to be happy. We think that we basically always value maximizing happiness the most we can. I think that we show that people are going to be happier because expanding on the depth of impact way against OG afterwards of what you do when you experience loss, how important these communities are for these people's daily lives, etc. And so, even if they're right, and overall, maybe we would not want to have this happen, we just think people are going to be so much happier given that we're doing this, then I'm willing to bite the bullet on whatever kind of win metric they're going to try to weigh above this utilitarian metric. Great. So I'll take you in a bit. So how exactly are we winning this debate? What we show you is this is beyond the responsibility of the state to intervene in order to solve these coordination problems and provide the service that would make people's lives better. Notice again, even in terms of the social contract, I just want to add one more mechanism here. In terms of the social contract, this is why the state comes into existence, in order to provide services to people. That's why we let it build roads. That's why we let it do all the things it does. Anyway, we say that they would, now, where we beat OO is by explaining that religion can be good. OO get up and say, but you're like a pig in a barn, or I don't know, all this kind of stuff. You have to reject empiricism, you must be conservative, you inherently lose autonomy. All of these things are just not comparative because they're not the delta of this debate. Progressive religions don't work like that. This has been pointed out to them multiple times. They're going to be losing the debate just because we don't have to accept the bad things that they're talking about. We're not telling people they're going to hell. We're not telling people they have to reject empiricism. We're not telling people they have to be conservative, and and I guess we take away people's autonomy to some extent. If they're willing to do this and they want to do this, I think that's probably fine, because the act of showing these people this religion, of making it accessible to them by building schools, by doing things, just like we would build roads in which we take away people's autonomy by taking away their money, but we think it's worth it because then these people are actually able to drive places, and I think that allowing these people to attend these schools if they desire is probably a taking away of autonomy that we're willing to live with. What I think this means is that they just can't win this debate right there. Then they tell us, we can find communities. Here's where I want to explain the 3 mechanisms, the two impacts that we weigh above opening government. So opening government tell us, in a nice way, they tell us, no, you know something, before I do this, I'll take a POI from, who did you take again?
So I'll take opening. Cool. Okay. If you want communities, fund community centers and projects. If you want progressivism, promote that.
Great.
Why is middleman you have to make excuses for?
Great, thank you. That's literally what I'm about to make. So, I think that this attack probably works against OG who like give you the headlines of, oh, you have a community that's important, oh, this gives you some form of identity. I think what we do here is a little bit more nuanced, because what we explain to you is that religion specifically differentiates on two lines. One, it is the depth of obligation within the community that people feel towards it, right? It means that even if they don't like you, they're going to make food for you when you're ill. They're going to give money to help you when you need surgery. They're going to come and visit you when you're in hospital. They're going to provide they're going to help your kids by driving them to school when you can't do it and pick up the slack for you there. They're the kind of community that is so much deeper than the average community that anyone can find. I don't know anybody in debate except maybe the people who I am the closest friends with in this world who I would turn to and trust my kids to, and yet that's what people in religious communities do on a daily basis when they send them to the after-school activities at these religious communities. Secondly, it's the scale of the community. There are just so many of these people. It's not one or two or maybe three people. It is 50, 100, loads and loads of people who you can turn to in your hour of need, who will be there for you to hear you crying. It is the community leaders who are there in a way that nobody else can be, because that's literally their entire job, is to take care of you and to listen to your problems and to try to understand what that flock necessitates. We think that just the depth of the benefit of the community these people have is something that is unique to religion. Secondly, the way it helps you deal with the bad things that happen to you in your life. I think that it provides you with, I don't know the word for nechama, I'm sorry, with exactly the kind of nechama that you need in your times of crisis that you cannot find in today's cold world. The final thing we do is we provide you with who this helps. This helps the people who want to leave the religion but cannot today, but also it just helps the vast majority of people who shouldn't just lies to you. So many of us in the secular community walk around feeling like nothing matters, like nobody cares about us, like it's a cold, cruel world. And this is exactly what religion helps us to solve. Please propose.
I thank the speaker for his speech. I'm glad to call for the opposition. We need to summarize the debate and all
Okay, never mind. So I am going to start in 3, 2, 1. To caution this debate, first of all, why it's just not legitimate to prefer one religion over the second, and second of all, how does it affect like religious people of both sides, both progressive and conservative people? Beforehand, a few points of rebuttal. Okay, first of all, Yishai comes and tells us, look, but the country funds whatever people cannot fund from themselves. Okay. Again, we fund what people cannot afford. Again, if they don't have a school for education, for basic education, then we're going to fund it for them, okay? But it's not that they don't have education at all. They want to fund them specific education. They never justify this idea, okay? We know that religious always get people the opportunity to come and join, so we don't have a problem of poor people who cannot afford religious school. Second thing it tells, those religions are not going to exist otherwise, okay? If we don't know, come on. Those religions are not going to exist otherwise, okay? So by their own logic, okay, we need to fund those extreme religion of the other side, because nobody believes them, and if we are not going to fund them, then they are going, they won't exist. But they don't want the extremist people, okay? They want the progressive people, and they want them to exist, assuming, okay, that progressive is just going to be much better. I'll take afterwards, okay? And then that tells the second thing, like the same thing that OG tells, but we need to give them choice. They never explain to why. They never explain to us why, okay? We don't need to give people funding for restaurant, right? Just because they love specific restaurant, right? I cannot understand this idea. Let's get into the clash. I think that the most important clash here is legitimacy, okay? Because once they tell that with the motion that we need to actively fund this idea, okay? They actually assume here that there is one religion which is much better than another. Let's talk about this a little bit more. Because OG comes and tells, no, I'm not going to take right now, I'll take you afterwards. Because OG comes and says, it is justified to give them money because three things. First of all, it gives you meaning. Second of all, the same thing that we give money for food, we give you something which is more important, which is meaning. And again, the idea, the idea of choice, okay? A few answers for that. First of all, they never explain to us why this is one of the social contract within people and the country. The country has to give you things like protection, like security, that people are not going to kill you. This is what the country is about. The country is not about telling you which religion you should join or prefer, okay? Again, the second thing I want to tell you, okay? It's also about meaning, okay? Khufshat, whatever, gives you a lot of meaning. It doesn't give me the legitimation just to have more resources for those, okay? But my obligation is just like to give you the basic need. But again, even if the country needs to give you something or some needs that they are assuming that this is like very basic, they never explain to you why it should give you many choices, right? More than they have the status quo. In the status quo, they have religion, okay? But the last thing I want to say about that is like what they're actually trying to do here, okay, is to intervene within the question of what is a good religion and what God really wants from you, okay? The country cannot decide on the question what is a good religion, okay? They don't have a contract with God. They don't know what God wants, right? So this is the idea where the country just cannot intervene and tell us, this is a good religion and we want to promote it over another country. I think that within this idea, we just decided, like we proved to you like the burden of why it's just simply not legitimate from many reasons. They never explain to us why. Before I'll take second.
Yeah, saying a secular person can join the Amish is like saying private people shouldn't get roads because they can pay for them themselves. We explain to you progressives don't have alternatives they can already join, unlike extremist religious people.
Even, first of all, I think they do have alternative. I'm going to explain it in my second pledge. But even if they don't have an alternative, I don't care, okay? They're not going to die just because they don't have a specific school that they need to send their children to, okay? Let's speak about them, okay? How it affects like religious people from both sides, okay? Because a second government tell us, there are people who really, like Aliza, okay? Aliza talks about herself, okay? They want to be progressive, they don't want to leave the religion, and now they are going to have a refuge, and they have this need, and they are really lonely. You know how they can solve the problem? They can vote for politicians who are really good at giving them what they need, and their politicians can give them the taxivim like other religions if they don't get in the status quo. You didn't understand what I'm saying. Okay, never mind. Okay, move on. But more than that, we think this is just not true, that they cannot, they don't have a like other place to go, okay? They can open like any other community, go open together around themselves, okay? Open their own schools, okay? If the religion, like any other people can I forgot a word, sorry, and provide like their own needs. This is what they can simply do. What we think we create here, we think we create a tension between conservative people and progressive people, okay? Because OG, really, what they really want to do is just like to convert the religion of people, okay? Because they have needs, and now they are going to have a tipping point, and this is what they are going to change them. So we think that for the conservative people, it's just going to create backlash. They are going to go against the country and just, the country wants to change us, we are not going to let it. We are going to interfere those people in order to fulfill what they want, okay? We just are going to create more attention for those people. So what we have brought to you, okay? We have brought to you on the principle level why we simply do not agree with that. We tell you that those progressive people are not just poor people that cannot take care of themselves, okay? Those progressive people can have a community which is a religious community, like every other people believe in democratic education. They send their children for a democratic education, which is private education, okay? Which is not funded by the country and is specific kind of education, and this is okay. For all these reasons, please oppose.